Hello, and welcome back from the break. It's time to begin our next panel discussion on personal growth and development. The year 2020 heightened the importance of professional expertise, personal development, and high-demand technology skills as employees transitioned to remote work and companies integrated new virtual business solutions. Rapidly changing conditions disrupted work responsibilities, complicated work-life balance, and challenged core beliefs. To be successful in this new environment, leaders and employees will look to enhance their skills through personal development, professional education, and customized learning opportunities. Our esteemed panel of industry thought leaders will help to ensure that we are prepared. I'm very happy to introduce our panel moderator, Dr. Katy Theory. Dr. Theory serves as a professor and department chair in the Forbes School of Business and Technology. She's an experienced leader and academic innovator who holds multiple professional certifications in human resources and focuses on continuous improvement and student success with an emphasis on training and performance improvement. I'm delighted to turn the floor over to Dr. Katy Theory.
Thank you for the introduction, Brandy. And that music break by artist Stephanie Rosado, that voice filled my soul. So that's a wrap on the personal growth and development panel. Who needs more than that? Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Katy Theory, Department Chair for the Forbes School of Business and Technology. Thank you, panelists, for being here to share your expertise and experiences. Thank you, participants, for your interest in this panel. Any panel on personal growth and development in 2020 should be titled Personal Growth and Development Through Adversity. This is a timely discussion featuring industry leaders who have successfully guided their workplaces through a variety of challenges. Their personal and professional experiences have prepared them for what 2020 has conjured up to provide you, our guests, with some insights and takeaways. As we get started, please use the chat feature to introduce yourself and the industry you join us from while I introduce our panelists. I see many of you are using the WOVA app, and Desiree Biggs, hi, shout out to you, has submitted a question. Thank you, Desiree. We are fortunate to have Bernice Flygirl Armour, known simply as Flygirl, to share her insight on simple steps to making gutsy moves. As a former police officer, soldier, Marine, and America's first African-American female combat pilot and United States Marine, Bernice has been out of the military for 13 years and is now CBO, that's Chief Breakthrough Officer, of her own company. Flygirl, I'm so glad that you're here to share your gutsy leadership principles.
Well, I'm excited to be here, and I don't get ready, I stay ready, so let's do it.
I love it. Please also welcome the man that defined the learning industry in corporate America, Dr. Steve Kerr, GE's first Chief Learning Officer and former Senior Advisor, where he worked closely with Jack Welch and led GE's renowned Leadership Education Center. After leaving Goldman Sachs as Chief Learning Officer, he again worked with Welch as co-founder and the first executive director of the Jack Welch Management Institute. I first met Steve through his publications, and likely you have too, as he's authored or co-authored 6 books and more than 80 journal articles. He's also appeared on ABC, CBS, CNN, NBC, PBS, and now here live. Dr. Steve Kerr, welcome.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to welcome Eddie Turner, author of the international best-selling book, 140 Simple Messages to Guide Emerging Leaders. He is also an international certified coach, master facilitator, certified speaking professional, and host of the Keep Leading podcast, which earned Apple Podcasts' coveted new and noteworthy designation. Welcome, Eddie.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Glad to have you. Well, never before have we needed to hear the words, "You've got this," "Find your courage," "Stop playing safe," "Make your mark." These also happen to be titles of Margie Worrell's best-selling books, reflecting her passion for empowering people to live and lead with greater courage. Margie is described by the Wall Street Journal as a global leadership authority who gets to the heart of what holds people back. She has taken the path less traveled many times, living in multiple countries and cultures, from Papua New Guinea, Singapore, where she joins us from now, to Washington, D.C. As an intrepid spirit, she's crossed the Sahara Desert, stayed in Palestinian refugee camps, hiked the Inca Trail, swam with piranhas in the Amazon, and cycled across Beijing. All of this in preparation for 2020. Welcome, Margie.
It's great to be with you and all of my fellow panelists.
Margie, I'd like to start by posing a question directly to you and invite the others to add in. Old paradigms on how to do business has certainly been disrupted, if not utterly dismantled, during this pandemic. What are the key barriers that keep businesses from adapting to change and seizing the opportunities that crisis always holds?
Great question, Katie. I think if you think of an organization, ultimately it's made up of people, and we human beings are wired for certainty, we're wired for safety, and we want to avoid anything that puts that at risk. And of course, when we find ourselves in the midst of a time of so much change and disruption and uncertainty, that primal instinct kicks in. And so a lot of people are going, well, I can't wait till we go back, but there is no going back. There's only going forward. But that new normal, whatever normal is going to emerge, we don't know what that looks like yet. And so what I've found in many organizations is hyper risk aversion, which is understandable. But whenever we're playing it really safe and avoiding risks, actually that in itself has risks. And so we have to be careful not to let that fear of the unknown and fear of change, fear of making a wrong decision, keep us from moving forward and making decisions. And so often that requires a lot of courage, because we have to make decisions amid the ambiguity, amid the uncertainty. We have to risk getting it wrong sometimes. And I think it's really overcoming that very innate instinctive drive for self-preservation that actually keeps individuals, teams, organizations from saying, look, what's the opportunity in this right now? Where is there opportunity for me individually and for our organization to grow, to come up with new ways of doing business, better ways of doing things, and adapt faster? So ultimately, it is about embracing the discomfort of this time and reimagining the future and being willing to forge very uncharted territory.
Your sentiment about fear absolutely, definitely inhibits our learning. And, you know, I see that Dr. Diane Hamilton's in our audience today, and her work on fear and its impact on curiosity is something that I've learned from Diane Hamilton's work. So thank you so much for sharing that, Margie. Fly Girl, were you going to say something there? I think I cut you off, but perhaps not.
I hadn't said anything. I was just agreeing with everything you said. And I just had this quote that kept going through my head, get rid of the fear and get your butt in gear, right? Like Napoleon Hill in his book, Think and Grow Rich, 1936, said most of the time, opportunities come disguised as obstacles, right? And when you think about that twist on what Margie just said, it's like I take vitamin O, the obstacle, give it to me every day, because that's where I'm going to find the opportunity. And when you are an organization or a person who looks curiously, right, has an intense curiosity, as Diane would say, to find the nugget amidst the rubble, man, that's where the juicy stuff is, because most people aren't willing to go there.
Well, it's difficult to intentionally bring ourselves outside of that comfort zone. And it usually happens unintentionally when we're forced to be in that space. So seeking out those opportunities to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
No, so right off the bat, here we go. Dr. Theory, I playing devil's advocate. So it's hard or challenging, maybe, unless you have conditioned yourself, right? Think about it. Military, we've conditioned ourselves to go into the hard stuff. NFL players, you've conditioned yourself to get into the it's challenging, but it's if we're in our comfort zone. If I'm in my comfort zone, I feel uncomfortable because like, wait a minute, it's too comfortable. And why am I comfortable, right? Versus looking for the challenge or reaching out there for the gritty, where I'm gonna have to give that little bit more. So,
Black Girl, is that innate for you? Is that something that you've learned through your professional and life experiences? Would you say that the average person, though, approaches life that way?
okay, so one of my drive home concepts for me: do what the average person does, have what the average person has. So I don't want to be average. Do you? Right? That's a question I will ask people. Do I think the average person has that outlook where they're always striving to be out of their comfort zone? No. And I would also submit the people who are here listening to the sound of our voice, participating in this panel, aren't average either, or they wouldn't be here. They're sharpening the saw, as Stephen Covey would say. So how do we steel sharpen steel, right? How do we challenge the folks here with us to hear these little nuggets and these points, these concepts of going further, striving harder, thinking outside the cockpit, as I would like to say, right? And making those gutsy, bold moves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Steve, let's involve you in this discussion. In a talk you delivered at the Accountability Plus Symposium in 2018, you shared with that audience secrets for how to create order out of chaos. I can't think of a more appropriate time to ask you to share how we can intertwine the personal growth and development needs of individuals, individual employees, with the pursuit of organizational objectives. Needed now more than ever. So at a time like this.
Well, there are 100 different approaches. I'll give you quickly something we did in G and something we did at Goldman. In G, what we did was we wanted to encourage individual development, but it can't be at the expense of organizational goals. That's your point. That's the tension. If you give it on either side, you don't have an effective result. So we had internally job descriptions, and we also had internal resumes, and we tried to align those. So the individual needs came out early. What kind of a career would you like to have? If you were successful within GE, would you want to be a CFO someday of a business, or perhaps the whole corporation? Would you like to be head HR officer? Would you like to be chief of technology, et cetera? And then what we did is we had paths that we thought constituted the best preparation for any of those career goals. So it was with attention to your individual needs, career paths, desires, and so on. We didn't make light of those. But at the end of the day, it's a work organization, it's not a day camp. So for example, if you wanted to be one kind of officer, we'd say, okay, for that path, you have to have both a short cycle business and a long cycle business experience. If you're going to be, for example, manufacturing or a chief operating officer, because everything is different. Everything, the planning and the budgeting and the cycle time is all different. We also had another notion was, you'll need to have both a commercial business, corporate business, and also government, because a lot of GE products are to the government. And everything you do, if your customer is a government, is different than if it's not. We also had an out-of-country experience, which for some career paths, desired paths, were essential, and others would be almost superfluous. Never useless, but not key. So that's the thing we did. And as people moved along, we would look to see who needed that experience next, instead of just the right people for the jobs. And you have to be willing to have some risk and some error. But we always said, WellChoice said, we're going to encourage risk-taking at the periphery to protect it at the core. So we had what Welch called popcorn stands. It's the Pareto notion that 80% of your revenue comes out of 20% of your organization's plus or minus one standard deviation. So if you've got a business like power systems or a business like aircraft engines in those days, you couldn't mess around. That was organizational needs were paramount. We didn't really care so much about developing you in that job. But on the way, we would let you make errors. We had businesses where we could afford to be wrong, and you could grow from those and learn from those. So that's the kind of balance that we tried to do. Real quickly, at Goldman, I tried to install that. We didn't have a built-in system we had in G, but I tried to put in something. But in addition, one thing I'd used in G, and it was really counterculture for Goldman, which is one reason I liked it so much, it really got them nervous and thinking, was I would get a list of the projects that we had to do. It was called Pine Street. It was a sort of a Crotonville operation I built on Wall Street. And we said that let's say we had 14 projects any time. I would give that to all my team members. I had a staff of maybe 10 or 12 based in home office, all different levels, from secretary to a managing director who works for me. And I said, if you want to be involved in this project, put your initials alongside the project. And if you want to run the project, circle your initials. So at Goldman, it kind of made them very uncomfortable. They're going to sign up. Nobody's going to take a dirty job. All of which was true. They weren't down. There were some times that I was the only person who was signing on for this thing. But I would say, look, man, I'm here by myself. I want somebody to help me out. And they would kind of do it. And sometimes somebody would circle a thing and they want to run a project, which I don't think they're qualified. And I'd say, look, this is kind of more subtle than it seems. Why don't you be on it? Let's work it on to Larry or Sally. And then one day soon you get the one like it. So you make some adjustments. And that's kind of what you have to do, I think, case by case, is to balance individual needs, not put them aside, realize that there's a lot of different goals and dreams and hopes and career paths. But at the same time, we are a work organization. We've got to get it right. We'll permit mistakes at the periphery in order to protect the core. The businesses, we got to get it right first time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Very good. Involving Eddie into the conversation. Eddie, you wrote a book on or for emerging leaders. One of your central points is that we're all emerging leaders. How does that apply to personal growth and development?
Indeed. When we think about what it means to be an emerging leader, when people hear that phrase, sometimes I have clients that will bristle. They'll say, well, no, I'm a senior leader. I've been doing this for many years. I'm not an emerging leader. And what I've tried to do through my work is to have people expand their lens of what it means to be an emerging leader. If 2020 and COVID-19 have taught us anything, it's that we must continue to grow. We cannot run our businesses or even our personal lives the way we were doing in February 2020. We have been forced to adjust, forced to change. And so emerging as a leader is a process where we continue to become the next best version of ourselves. And as leaders, we continue to add to our competency. We must develop new skills, especially in a time like this. We see this evidence in many ways, as our panelists have already so eloquently commented on. But you take the organizational scenario, as Steve explained. There were organizations that insisted you can't do some things virtually. No, it must be face-to-face. Well, the reality is, with very few exceptions, we're finding that much of what has happened in organizations can be done virtually. So much so that you had Twitter and a couple of other high-tech organizations say, we're going to just work from home forever. You don't have to come back to the office. But recently, last week, Microsoft said the same thing. Well, Microsoft tends to set the tone because they're not seen as just tech anymore. They were one of the first to do away with annual performance reviews. And so other corporations followed their lead. What will that do to the future of work? So people are getting comfortable with this foreign concept that was okay for certain roles, becoming okay with many more roles of working from home. Well, as that happens, leaders in an organizational context are forced to emerge in new ways as they manage workforces that are spread out. This concept that I have to always be watching what someone is doing. Well, that's not the case anymore. So emerging as a leader takes on many new levels in the face of what we're dealing with right now, and quite frankly, as we prepare for the future of work.
Eddie, you made the comment about finding the next best version of ourselves. And I think that Fly Girl pegged our audience correctly, that they're likely here because they're not settling for average either. I'd like to call upon a question our audience member asked to make sure that we get to this question. And I think it's appropriately timed. New times call for new solutions as well. And Desiree asked, so I open this up to the group. What are some newer holistic wellness methods for personal growth? Are there new findings? And I invite Desiree to feel free to clarify the question as our panelists respond to that. Again, the question is, are there some newer holistic wellness methods for personal growth? Are there new findings? Anyone want to take the first stab at that?
I'm going to just jump in there. There's obviously new research is constantly coming out, but something that's really, I think, emerged, which isn't new at all, and that is mindfulness. And obviously that's been a bit of a buzzword now for about 10 years. But I think it's become far more relevant and pivotal over the last 6 months, because if you get down to, there are no new, gems of wisdom that haven't ever emerged throughout history. Basically, they get reincarnated in new forms and with new words. But I think in the midst of a time like this, some of the ancient practices that people have been practicing since time immemorial, then have really come to the fore. And so in the workforce right now, we're recognizing that we have to take care of whole people. Mental health is really important right now in organizations, our own mental health, emotional health, etc. And we can help support that for ourselves by very simple practices and things that help to keep us grounded and stop that anxiety, that fear from taking over, because a lot of people are really struggling with that. And simple, the ancient practice that's become contemporary of mindfulness can be extremely powerful.
Margie, something that I think with technology has really gone away is that is pen to paper, and the activity, the exercise of journaling and putting pen to paper is something that we have far gone from. And I think that's something that has certainly helped me from a wellness standpoint. But I'll direct a question of a similar note to Fly Girl, because of course, just when we think things couldn't get crazier, they do. I know that you're working on a new book, The Gutsy Move, and by the title, it sounds perfectly timed. So first, there's this pandemic, and then the workplace and economic turmoil that's flowed from COVID-19, adding to that, ongoing racial tensions, raging wildfires, devastating hurricanes, and an upcoming presidential election in a very deeply divided country. So people have a lot thrown at them. What can leaders do to create, as we're talking about a more human-centric workplace, what can leaders do when everyone is coping with so much?
Yeah, I think it boils down to, and this is going to seem very simple, very trite, almost kind of cliche, but what's our why, right? When I was going through Marine training, and every Marine Corps officer goes through the exact same school called the basic school, because every Marine is a Marine first, right? And we always focused on what's the mission and the word of the day. What was the word of the day? Where we gave the information, it was passed down, what we were doing the next day, what it looked like, what we're driving towards, because we wanted everyone, every single Marine, to know exactly what the mission was so they could connect to it with whatever their purpose or strategy wasn't. If you're with this squad, or you're in rifle, or you're support by fire, or you're down in the trenches, or you're up, no matter what, we're all connecting to that same mission. So as leaders, if we can connect, when we can connect our teams to the why and how they fit into the why, that's huge. And my own personal experience of how I fit into my own why, right? I'm a speaker, I travel around a bunch. I was supposed to be getting my digital stuff set up, and my coaching over here, and digital delivery, and my consulting and virtual. Then, and that's for years, believe me, years. I was doing it. I'm doing it. Then COVID hit. A couple weeks, I'm thinking, oh, this is gonna be great. I get some time off. I don't have to travel. A couple more weeks, I'm like, whoa, like all my keynotes as far as the eye could see vanished in an instant. And I wasn't doing my digital stuff because I was having too much fun traveling, playing golf, hauling my snowboard out to Colorado or Whistler when I go. I mean, life is fun, right? You're living it up. I was anyway. And I had to quickly, well, first I kicked myself in the butt. Let's be honest. I did the whole negative self-talk. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Then I remembered that I used to get excited. Remember that first recession when people lost their jobs, got laid off and all that stuff? And I would say, yes, that's awesome. You say, why are you excited? I'm like, because now you could do what you didn't have the guts to do before, because you were too comfortable in your job with the paycheck and the benefits, and you got the wife and the kids and right? And that time produced so many millionaires, people who became entrepreneurs because they said, if not now, when? So I said, okay, got to take my own medicine. So I got excited about the opportunity inside the obstacle, right? And I said, let me reassess, reimagine, reinvent, right? A lot of folks say that the whole pivot thing. But there's just more to it than just pivoting, right? What are we seeing? Again, what do we really want? Then as I'm sitting there thinking about that stuff, I watched George Floyd take his last breath. And as a former police officer, former soldier, Marine, diversity officer for headquarters Marine Corps, liaison to the Pentagon, right? Over diversity policy for all the armed services. And on the other side, an openly gay Black woman said, what do I do in this moment? How do I show up for me? How do I show up for my community? Oh my God, what do I do? And I felt like if I don't know what to do, and I have like all these little dots, right? How does the white mom in suburbia know what to do? So one of the first thoughts was, well, social media. I'm like, oh, well, I don't do political. And I very quickly got to, this isn't political. This is about our humanity, right? This is about our community and how are we coming together to engage and transform in a very difficult time where there are obviously some inequities going on. So in a moment of this chaos, as Dr. Kerr would talk about, how do we make sense of it? At the end of the day, even though we're all coming from different places, different thoughts, different dynamics, at the end of the day, how do we come together as one community, one nation, right, with liberty and justice for all? And I know there are people listening to this from all around the globe. And I think this is a global conversation. It's not just here in the States. We're trying to create equity for many, many communities, women, right? And it's a conversation we have to stay engaged in, but it's also a conversation we have to take action on. So I'll stop there.
Well, thank you for adding that. And Desiree, you heard a few things already from Margie, the tried and true, age-old techniques, right? Going back to, are we doing some of those things, whether it be meditation, mindfulness, journaling? You heard from Fly Girl, reflecting on your why. When I hear that, I think about aligning what you do with who you are. And finding that alignment. Desiree, I hope that helped, added some food for thought, but I'd also like to pause and ask others if there's anything they more they want to add to that.
I'd love to
for
add something
Desiree
to
and the
that.
benefit of others.
I'd like to add to that if I could, Dr. Theory.
Great.
Yes. So I really think about a quote that I saw from Dell. Dell Technologies did a research study, and they released it in 2017. And in 2017, they said that 80% of the jobs that are going to come online in 2030 don't exist yet. So they were telling us pre-COVID that new learning would be required. So we're thinking about personal development. What skills can we attain? Well, fast forward to what we've seen in COVID, we've seen several industries altogether fall offline, accelerating this shift to newer services, newer businesses. So this has increased the need for us to develop ourselves. And to the point that Fly Girl shared, in 2008, after the last crisis, many millionaires were made because that's where Uber was born. That's where other great services came out of that crisis. What services, what technologies, what businesses will come out of this crisis? So this personal growth means, what skill can I take advantage of that I have that I can do better at, or what new skill can I gain? What educational opportunities are becoming available uniquely now that were not available in the past? Even Harvard, for the 2020 school year, opened up seats to anybody in the globe, anywhere. The requirement normally is you have to fly there on campus, live there, give up your life. They waived that. The response they got to that was overwhelming. because people are saying this is a one-time opportunity to get the official degree without any subcontext on it, and take advantage of it. So what educational opportunities here at the Forbes Business School of Technology at Ashford can you seize now that may not have existed before, because you have time that you will never get back in the future?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Eddie. I'm glad you interjected with that. And I see a question from our audience. And Margie, I'd like to direct this one to you, but first preface it with some work that you've already done, or there are two columns in particular that you authored. First, building a culture of courage in the virtual workplace, and finding purpose in this pandemic. And obviously, as we've been talking about, leading with courage, not fear, is critical right now. And given heightened levels of uncertainty and fear, I know that we asked this question of you: how can leaders help keep their teams and employees focused and engaged? But to add to that, so keeping employees focused and engaged alludes to a bit of necessary positivity, right? That we're their biggest cheerleaders and want to keep them focused on organizational objectives, as Dr. Kerr referred to. But to the question from our audience, in lieu of COVID-19, we're all doing our best to stay positive. Consequently, the concept of toxic positivity emerges as one that is quite noticeable nowadays. So the question is, what's your take on it, and how can we avoid it? If you'd first start by defining from your perspective what is meant by toxic positivity. Your thoughts?
Got it. Okay. So I feel there's a few different questions in there. But toxic positivity is the tendency to take the be positive mindset and just overgeneralize it to everything. And I did write a Forbes column on that a few months back, and I'll put the link up in a moment. But the truth is, obviously, being positive and having a positive mindset's massively important. Mindset matters enormously in times like this. But that doesn't mean that it's not okay to feel emotions that are hard, that are difficult. In fact, research shows that we need negative, difficult emotions to flourish. And it's not about saying, well, I'm not going to be sad or feel anxious about something, but it is about saying, I'm going to acknowledge those emotions. I'm going to look, because every emotion has got something to teach us, but I'm not going to let them consume me. They're not going to set up permanent residence. And now I'm going to choose the attitude I bring to whatever the challenge is. And looping this back to leadership and to your question, the Forbes columns I've written about how do we lead through crisis? How do we lead through disruption? Recognizing that emotions are contagious. And any emotion we have, if we're having it enough, it's going to leak out onto those around us. And leaders act a little bit like emotional barometers. In the midst of tough times, people look to them and go, well, how are they dealing with it? So if you're stressed out of your brain, that stress is going to spread. So leaders actually really have to show up with what I call deliberate optimism. And that is, it's not to deny the brutal reality and the harsh situation that we're dealing with. Sometimes really difficult choices have to be made. And we're seeing that across businesses and in every sphere. But that doesn't mean we should give up optimism that we will come outside this. The future is one that is we should look forward to, and to spread that optimism onto those around us. And I know for me, earlier back in March, actually, when my husband got COVID-19, and I was feeling kind of overwhelmed. I have kids on another continent, and I just thought, okay, I got to just own how I'm feeling. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. I'm feeling a bit anxious. But how do I choose to show up in this moment? And I think when we're really deliberate in how we choose to show up, that actually helps to have other people go, you know what, we're going to get through this. And, my book, You've Got This, it's about saying, I've got this, you've got this, we've got this. We'll get through this. It might be tough, but we will get through it.
Okay, so going back to this question though, and Vernice, I know that you wanted to potentially weigh in on this. Is there a fine line between, I love this phrase, deliberate optimism and toxic positivity? How do we ensure that as leaders that we're being deliberately optimistic without dismissing the feelings that exist in the workplace due to all of the factors that we've talked about? Does that make sense?
Completely, totally. And I have a friend who is this fatalist optimism person, right? Now, I'm an optimist, like for real. My great grandmother always had something good is going to come out of this, right? I mean, it could have been catastrophic, and great grandmother was going to say that. But it was being committed to creating the opportunity out of the obstacle, right? But my bud, something would happen. She'd say, "Oh, it's going to be okay." Oh, that's going to be like, I know this isn't okay. Now we can create something out of it, but what just happened isn't okay. And I'm a little upset about it right now. And I don't want to, because sometimes it feels like you're being patronized, right? And it's like, let's acknowledge the emotion that I'm feeling. What's it telling me? What I want to get from it? Let it pass through to evolve into the next emotion, right? And that's the whole thing of working through your emotion and how you feel versus suppressing it and just pushing it down for it to boil up, fester, and come out and manifest in some other kind of way, right? Where it doesn't have to build up to be stress in the first place, even though, Dr. Worrell would say, there's healthy stress and there's not healthy stress. How do we help our physiology and our mentality, our mental health by knowing it's okay? People ask me, do I ever get scared or do I have fear? I'm like, yes. Do I have bad days? Yes. I mean, all of our emotions are valid and they're here for a reason. And sometimes when we feel like we go through the darkest day, it makes the day even brighter. So how can we as leaders do something about the whole fake positivity, if you will? Number one, hear our people. Acknowledge their feelings. Mm-hmm. Then we can say, you know what, I hear you, mm-hmm. and this is what we're going to do. Here's the plan. Mm-hmm. I think that would go over 1,000,000 times better.
I love that. Fly
Dr.
girl.
Theory, is it just me or is anybody else feeling better about themselves knowing that Fly Girl gets scared at times and Fly Girl has bad days because she's like Superman in my book?
Right. Dr. Maya Zalahik, I'm so pleased that you posed that question for the audience. And I hope that we couldn't have not planned that any better. I imagine that there's a topic that you could also select from, and Margie will have posted some column or published some column in Forbes about it. So Margie, thanks so much for being so quick to share that resource as well.
Can I ask the audience a quick question? Because I know we have quite a few attendees. I just wanted to know if they could put some of their challenges in the chat, because I'd like to save them and maybe do some posts on LinkedIn or something like that, or maybe have a conversation with Margie because she's absolutely brilliant. And Eddie, he always puts a smile on my face. And Dr. Steve, I mean, he's GE. Right. I mean, he is going to create some streamline out of the chaos. So I would love to hear, what some of the folks who are listening to us are thinking and feeling. Maybe if we can get some of their participation. Can they put in the chat? They can type in the chat, right?
I believe so. We'll pause for a moment to ensure that we get some of that. Perhaps we can respond to live here.
Not that I'm trying to pull you off.
No, that's perfect. We want to hear from our audience. And I did check the questions via the app. So thanks, Desiree, for leading by example with that app. Thanks, Maya. Well, if you're not going to respond live to that, please know that there's the app as well that we can stay connected and continue this discussion. So I hope you take Fly Girl up on that request and we can carry on the conversation there as well. We have some time left. Welcome the questions from the audience. Steve, I'd like to direct a question though to you with respect to the number of publications, books, and articles depicting the horrors and shortcomings of performance reviews. I'm imagining organizations right now ixnaying performance reviews for some time. And as we identify a person's strengths and development needs, as you talked about earlier, as this is a critical component of personal growth and development, what are some of the ways that organizations can accomplish this more effectively?
Well, there are a lot of specific things people could do, but the underlying principle is you can't use the same thing for control and for development. You can't use the same form, you can't use the same meeting, you can't use pace. If you say, I want you to be open to this feedback, and by the way, it may cost you your job or your promotion, no one can be.
Yeah.
So you have to separate the two. And the ones that have worked, and there's a graveyard full of stories about bad performance reviews and assessments and all that, but they usually don't go on to say what you ought to do instead. And what we've got to do is separate the two. So for example, in any organization I've been responsible for, just both GE Systems and Goldman's, as well as from universities, the spring was a time for developmental review. And I told people, I'm going to tell you my view, no hard copies going to HR. No paid decisions being made on it. If I'm wrong, you got 6 months to show me I'm wrong. If I'm right, you get 6 months to fix it. And then the winter, or late in the year, we did the review that counted. Everything went formally. And people were usually more receptive. And if they weren't, you felt more, instead of the pulling punches that so many managers do, because they don't want to hurt the people, you say, look, I told you in June, I told you in September, now I'm going to dock you for it. So it increased the likelihood it would be accepted, and it increased the safety, and then you could work on it. And then usually the developmental, the going forward year should be with a 6-week interval, particularly if the review is negative, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, then you bring them back to the time nobody's listening to exciting new developmental needs and they've just been shut down. So then you still look, I didn't enjoy the last meeting, you didn't look like you were crazy about it either. What do each of us have to do now different so that we'll have a much better view next time? And it's not a magic cure, but it makes people much more receptive to development, and it uses performance feedback in a way it's likely to be well accepted. Just one other thing, for time. Whenever I did a review of anybody in any job I've had, at the review time, I said, when we do the review, you must come in with one thing about something I could do differently would help you do a better job. And don't tell me I'm so great you can't think of anything. I don't want 10, but I don't want 0. You tell me 1 or 2 things that I could help you with, and I'm doing it wrong and I need to improve. And that also makes it safer. If people are willing, and if they're willing to tell you about yours, they're usually willing to be more open about their own. You get much more candid dialogue, and also recognize the truth. Sometimes the subordinate's bad performance is that we screwed up, we gave them a vague task, we didn't give enough resources, all kinds of things. And even if we didn't, it's great to hear their view of why they think it did. It will increase the receptivity to when you work it through. So those are just a general framework about. Don't try to use the same form, the same session for feedback, for control, and for development. There's nothing better than saying no hard copy goes to HR, because then people are going to listen. So like you and I are working together to make sure we don't give them bad news in 6 months.
Right. Dr. Kerr, I feel like that goes along with Flygirl's sentiment earlier about really listening, really being present as leaders and really listening for understanding. So thank you for sharing that. What I'd like to open a question for the group. What advice do you have to share with leaders, with individual contributors about how they look at their current situation? And I mean a lot by that, meaning however our audience members might interpret current situation and turn it into a positive learning experience and emerge from it stronger and better. What advice do you have? Let's start with you, Eddie.
I'm thinking about something that I heard Dave Ulrich say at a forum, and he used an illustration that we all have a loved one who's been hurt at our home or someplace, and we triage them right away, bandaged them up, tried to stop the bleeding, got them to an ambulance took them to the hospital, stitched them up, took care of them, then they returned home. Well, their trip return home may look very different than it did before. Maybe you have to build a ramp for them. Maybe there are some medical devices they need help with on the way to recovery, but you have to make adjustments, but you get them home. Well, we are all going through a difficult time right now, but hopefully we're out of that triage stage. And as a nation, as a world, as a society, we're going through this ambulatory ride. and we're hoping to get it all stitched up, but the home may look very different when this is over. So again, what are we doing to work on our own personal remediation? What are we doing for organizational remediation? Are we equipping ourselves to think differently, act differently, and not keep wishing for a return to what the way things used to be? Are we equipping ourselves mentally for the fact that we have to make some permanent shifts and on our way to recovery?
I could say something to that. Do you want to go first, Margie?
No, you go. I'll jump in after you. That's fine.
All right. It would be along the lines of not taking this moment for granted, right? Everyone wants to wish this moment away. And I remember I was on deployment. Things were crappy in the squadron. My girlfriend was doing crazy stuff, and I was thousands of miles away in Iraq, and like everything just felt messed up. And I remember walking home from the gym, well, in my tent, like the talcum powder stops everywhere, you know, and I just stopped. The sun was searing off my skin. It was 123 degrees. And as I stood there with the dust billowing around, I took a huge deep breath, and I could feel the 120-degree dust and sand go into my lungs. And it was not a nice breath. It was a little painful. And I said, that is a breath I will never take again. This is a moment I will never have again. I can wish myself out of this squadron. I can wish myself off of this deployment. I can wish myself out of the Marine Corps. Before I know it, I will have wished my life away. And in that moment, because tomorrow, like think about, I was in Iraq. Tomorrow wasn't even promised for me, right? I mean, I have brothers and sisters that didn't come home. So in that moment, I said, whenever I feel pain, number one, it's going to remind me that I'm alive. And number two, it's all growing pains. Life is preparing me for that next mission I'm being called to do. So if we look at any pain as just growing pains and look for the lesson, have an intense curiosity for what am I supposed to be getting out of this moment, this emotion, this situation, this relationship, it just takes on a whole new meaning. Don't wish your life away. We are where we're supposed to be. The detour is the path.
Fly Girl, your video series that I think that I discovered from your website was so incredibly powerful, by the way. And hearing you speak now even reminds me of what you sparked, the thoughts that you sparked in me, and that like, oh no, here we go, because I was moved by your, not just what you said here, but by that video series that, can we all find that on your website, by the way? I know that you'll know what I'm talking about with respect to the video series and what you just talked about here. And I interrupted you, Margie. I'll turn the mic over to you.
Yeah, Margie, go, because I've done quite a few video series with other people. Okay. So I would just say, go to my website or go to my YouTube channel. I need to put more videos up there. What am I doing? Oh my God. Okay. Margie, over to you.
You're awesome. I'm going to check out your video series. So that's fantastic, whichever one it is. No, I think if anyone listening, if you think back on your life and the experiences that have shaped you the most, that have introduced you to your strengths, that have helped you discover talents you didn't even know you had and have sharpened them, it won't be from all the times everything went just the way you wanted. I mean, that's great to have success. It's awesome when things do go the way you want. It's actually the times when life doesn't go the way we want, when our plans derail and we hit a wall, that actually that's when we have often the most exponential growth experiences, and when we discover things in ourselves. And I know that from my own experience, I've actually had to deal with a ton of disruption, even moving. I think I've had 6-7 moves around the world and raising my 4 kids in between it all. And it's been challenging and trying to, launch careers and manage businesses. And I think, well, if it had all just gone easily, I wouldn't be able to connect and understand other people as well, because it's from my own struggles. And so growth and comfort, as I learned growing up on a small farm in rural Australia, growth and comfort can't ride the same horse. And sometimes we can choose to get out there and we can say, hey, I'm going to go fly a plane in a war zone. But other times life just thrusts us out of our comfort zone. And that's happened in 2020. And actually this year has the richest experiences for us to actually grow and learn and forge new ground in ways that we never would if it had just all gone along smoothly, as lovely as that would have been. And so I think, look for ways. How can you turn your biggest challenges into a catalyst for your greatest growth? Right. And the answer is never outside you. Ultimately, it requires looking inside yourself for the answers that you're seeking and for the certainty that you're seeking. And I think the more we can look within ourselves and go, whatever happens, I can handle it, it actually expands our bandwidth. Literally, even it engages the cognitive part of our brain and our creativity to look around and go, how else could I be dealing with this here? Whereas when all we do is go, woe is me, this is terrible, my gosh, it's not fair, it actually limits what we see as possible. So look for the opportunity, because it's there. And I think Vanessa said earlier, that it's actually the 2008 financial crisis. That's when more millionaires were made, or billionaires. So what are you going to do to actually find the opportunity in this? And it ultimately, as much as organizations should be creating the conditions for people to thrive and do their best work, they don't always do that, because people are often interested in their own themselves. So you have to take responsibility for that, and don't wait for others to do it for you.
Well, I think you just answered the final question that we don't have time to expand on, but I think it was truly, Margie, the answer to Azara's question, who states, one of my challenges is analysis paralysis in making decisions. How do you choose effectively and in a timely manner, even when you may be unsure of the outcome of your decisions? If that's not the $1 million question, if there were a guarantee, Azara, thank you so much for your question. Margie, essentially for responding to that question, perhaps without knowing it. We're out of time, everyone, but I want to close by saying thank you, Fly Girl. Thank you, Eddie Turner. Thank you, Dr. Steve Kerr. Thank you, Margie Worrell, for being here to share your expertise and your experiences. Let's close by using Margie's book titles again, as we encourage all of you to find your courage, stop playing safe, make your mark. Thank you, participants, for your commitment, your personal growth and development, and your interest in this panel. Look forward to connecting with you in the app.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to our panel moderator, Dr. Katy Theory, and to all of those amazing and inspirational panel members for that incredibly uplifting discussion. Thank you so much, guys.